you probably will not scale beyond the level of feedback that you're willing to receive. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Maddie. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here.
I am too. I would love for you to, actually, I'll back up. So you are a tech founder and so many other amazing things, but I think it'd be fun to start before you got into tech. Like, I want to learn a little bit about what your journey was like getting into entrepreneurialism.
Absolutely. So, full disclosure, I should probably say this because one of the fastest growing entrepreneur segments right now is sort of the above 50 segment. So, and I am above 50. And so before this life of entrepreneurship, I always had this really strong desire to work on this kind of impact, that kind of impact being like global impact and helping people live better lives, and very much in healthcare. So, improving the health of people, patients, populations, countries. I did a lot of work to do those kinds of things. I worked in the United Nations. I worked for the World Bank. I worked for WHO. I worked for a long time in the pharmaceutical industry. And in those kinds of roles, really about creating access for patients. And very often in like kind of global health scenarios where we're talking about the LDCs, the low developing countries. And I still actually sit on one of the Gates Foundation boards, which manages all of the global pipeline in malaria. So I still have my foot in some work in global health and public health. But those were my really big ambitions in my life, I would say, to get me to where I am. And so when my founder came to me and said, I have this idea. I'm thinking about having you. Would you like to co-found this with me? And I was like, yes, because I feel like everything I did up to this point, although I'm so happy that I did all these things, I had a very fulfilling, very enriching career. Getting to this point where working in, let's say, community-based health, public health, working with olders. So our company is called Viva Valet. You can find us at www.vivavalet.com. We are like the way that Expedia is to the travel industry. You have a platform, you can find all of your choices if you want to take a holiday. That's what Viva Valet is to older care, and that we actually pre-vet, we pre-arrange all these things for you in a platform for non-medical services for the elderly. So what that means is like, it could be food delivery where we have like a week's worth of meals that we could put in an older's home and take out all the garbage so they don't have to manage that. There could be rides, it could be assisted rides, like including wheelchair assistance, those kinds of things. We also do cleaning, which is often something that they need help with. And I think our biggest seller really is that we do home modifications, home safety assessments and home modifications.
Cool.
So very often, like when you're older, you have to all of a sudden look around your home for any kind of potential tripping hazard. So loose carpeting or anything at all that you might trip over. So our people go in and we do that as safety assessment. We mark what are the must do things like new guardrails, grab rails, hammering things down, removing things out of a path of walking so that we don't have a risk, because that's where most of our hospitalizations in the elderly are coming from, are falls that result in hip fractures, which result in emergency surgeries, which result, I think there's 300,000 of these type of admissions to hospitals per year in the United States. So we're trying to find every way we can to reduce that. So that was like, that's the what. The why of it is really like, my founder and I are both adult daughters of aging parents, and we have olders in our life that we want to care for, and sometimes we're at a great distance from them. So that's really that's the why and the how and all these things.
Yeah. I'm curious also, what was your experience like working with organizations like the WHO? I mean, they're so big. And I guess really what I'm curious about is, did you feel like you were able to enact real change by being a part of those? Or do you feel like sometimes like bureaucracy would get in the way, or it was challenging for a lot of people to agree at that level?
Yeah, I think I would say both of those things happen. in those organizations, in the organizations generically, and also from my experience, I would say both. When you think about the World Bank versus WHO, they do very different things. So the World Bank will actually give what they call like a credit or structural credit or a loan, effectually often a grant to a country. And so the unit that I worked with would work directly with the ministries of health and finance to make sure that the money that was going targeted towards health care and or healthcare system spending was spent responsibly, and that all those people that were like the custodians of that money understood what they needed to do in order to drive change. So we'd often start with, what's the impact that you're trying to make? Is it a disease reduction? Is it changing the workforce that you have? Is it changing the kinds of visits that you have, or the physical infrastructure? We'd start with those big ticket items that we're trying to actually create, and then we would pull it backwards to the milestones that they would need to do. So that's like the World Bank kind of model. And I think there, yes, like there are really real change happens in those organizations. And that's often because there's real money behind it. And there's real resources and real technical assistance that's backed up by money, that has political will behind it. And there are sort of consequences for not spending the money correctly and all those things. I think with WHO, it's a very different animal because WHO doesn't have the financial resources, but they do have the credibility. They do have the ability to do technical assistance from a thinking perspective. So let's say a Ministry of Health was saying, like I'm working with one right now, for example, as a consultant, they want to create a new pharmaceutical system. And they would say, what is it that we need to do? So we, as a system of consultants, advisors, sometimes academics, could put together different models of what would work given their GDP per capita, their population size, the kind of goals that they have at the public health level. We could put together different models that would work for them and say, like, here's 5 things you can do. Pick one. And then we would walk away and they would do the implementation. Of course, we're always a phone call away, but it's a very different kind of approach. So many people know WHO for its role around COVID, brokering a lot of the volumes of the vaccine that were actually made available. Most of what WHO is not that. It's actually more about the technical assistance of, hey, I want to make this change. Help me do this. Or I want to make a policy around obesity or cancer or smoking. They can give advice on what other countries do. And again, based on the benchmarking of where that country looks, what they look like, what they're trying to achieve, they can present options. So again, I think, can you make real change? Yes. And I think from the WHO perspective, as much as the political will sits behind it to affect that change and implement that change, yes. So I think the link to the UN system and what we're doing at Viva Valet that we are really excited about is that we were actually invited to be on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Council on Aging and aging in tech. So my founder and I actually sat in on meetings together with the UN bodies, different academics, Microsoft, other tech players like this, as well as AARP in the US, to talk about when you are designing technology for older people, what are the things that you need to put in place? So we both had we had broadband, like general broadband access. How do you make that available for places where you might have internet deserts or coverage deserts? And how do you create incentives so that the elderly can have more access to broadband access so that we can get them online? And then once they're online, how do we design for them differently and more effectively? So we got to be in some of those white papers. And that was really exciting because what we see as we get in this space is that as we work even with our own UI UX designers, we go through this process ourselves. Very often the people that are doing the designing and the engineering, the oldest person they know is in their 40s.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like with so much of your project, I imagine that it was one of those things where you had like this idea where like, okay, we're going to create a platform to make caring for our elders a lot easier. But the more that you dug into the problem, I imagine like the more you realized there was there, and like you were able, I think, to expand greater, right, beyond just like healthcare services, but even down to like cooking and cleaning and discovering all these things that they need. And also on top of how they would utilize the platform. Because literally, I was watching this documentary the other day, and it was just so funny because this woman, she was probably in like her late 60s, probably early 70s. And she's like, how do I turn this iPhone on Do Not Disturb? And they're like, swipe down. And the way that she swiped down was so aggressive and like such a big motion where the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think you probably experience a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other entrepreneurs can relate to this, but the way that people interact with your platform and your product is sometimes so different from how you would originally anticipate, or like how you go about making those changes and experiencing them testing your product to be able to then serve your community even better.
100%. And so, in fact, for us, the starting point was less about saying, we have this idea, let's build it. It wasn't that. It was, we have this idea because we're aware of the problem. The problem is we have the largest aging population in human history. And those people want to stay in their homes. We know this, that 90%, based on the research we've done, 90% of people that are of 70 above want to stay in their home of origin, or maybe the home they've lived in for the last 20 to 30 years.
You mean as opposed to going to like a place?
Exactly. So going to a place like going to independent living, or going into a home.
Yeah.
Because first of all, they just don't want to. They wish to stay in their home because they wish to remain independent and stay where they are. The other thing is it's financially, it's financially a block. So it's usually the opening ticket price is around $100,000 a year to move into one of these facilities. Yeah. So, and in-home care facilities, for example, are starting ticket of $60,000 a year to get the care in your home, versus going in a home, which is starting price of $100,000. So like it's financially a block for many people. It's also the wish that they have to remain independent, remain integrated in the community. So we knew that we had this problem. We knew that we had our own itch that we were trying to scratch because we have our own elders that we're trying to care for from a distance. Yeah. So what we chose to do is, instead of jumping in to design the product and saying, okay, well, we've got a product, let's find the market. We actually went to the market. We did 2 months of research in terms of ethnographic research, cameras in people's homes, ethnographic research, trying to understand what are your hopes, dreams, fears for the future. What would you like? How would you like to live your life? And what things will help you along the way? And also part of that process was how to use technology to bridge some of these gaps, like a lot of things like calendaring, organizing lists, those kinds of things connected to relatives and things. And at the very, like the basic thing, like if I've got my phone here, you and I might pick up our phone and send a text like this, right? Yeah. We would text with our thumbs, right? First step, they're holding their phone like this and they're going like this. So already we know that they're holding, they're doing this. So they're holding the phone and interacting with their device differently than you and I with younger eyes might do. So already we knew that from a design fluidity perspective, things needed to look differently, and you might have to make your choices with one finger. Also, it means that you have to have a really good desktop solution. So on our website, we have I guess it's like regular mode and then easy mode. And easy mode is you can slide that right. And then olders have a version which is designed for them, with them. Because we had a panel of olders who were between 75 and 92 who were supporting us in the design of this, and checking all the wireframes, all the early sketches, all the early pilots that we had. We had them go through the UI UX testing, which was also fascinating. Imagine doing that over Zoom with an 80 or 85-year-old. That is whole next level of how are you going to not just use an IT product, but test an IT product. So the whole experience was beautiful. But we learned things like color. As you get older, the ability, your color acuity is fading. So certain colors need to be avoided. You need to really have high contrast. You need to obviously have larger buttons, but fewer buttons and fewer choices. Because choice is overwhelming from a human's perspective, but also from an older's perspective. So we knew really early on that from a business perspective, it's better for us to say, you have a need, we hear your need, let us just arrange that need. If you want to have a cleaner, we'll do it for you based on the postal code. If you have a home modification, let us know what it is that you need and we'll arrange that for you. In order for our people, our vendors to get onto our platform, they have rigorous steps that they have to go through. And that's also what came, I would say, from this research that we did, and also from our own life and our own families. And the number one factor there is less about like, how does the tech feel, but how do I feel about trustworthiness of this tech platform and of the services that are going to come. I won't allow anyone to go into my father's home who I don't trust, and I need to find ways that I can measure that. So for us, we have a rigorous screening system, doing criminal background checks, insurance, all these things. We do interviews, we train them, they have to take an exam, they have to do test runs where we have to monitor them. And then once they actually are serving our customers, we're monitoring them when they go on the site. So we can always stand behind that as this is a trusted service because we are watching them and we're giving you the feedback all along the way.
Yeah. How did you guys like set up the research process? Because I think this is so important. Research is such a crucial stage if you want to put out a product or service. I think everyone needs to do it regardless of what vertical you're in. So how did you get people to test this? Like, were you reaching out to friends and family? Did you put out an ad? What was that process like?
Yeah. So we worked with an agency, actually. We worked with an agency that was based out of Kansas City, and they helped us source 15 different individuals that were part of our study. So that's part of an IRB process. So like a formal ethics committee process where things are signed with an ethics committee. And those were, I think we were in 4 different cities. Yeah, we were in 4 different cities, 15 subjects. And again, the agency managed all of the compliance components. I realize that as a startup, this is a very unusual thing that we did to be so rigorous. And I think a lot of it comes from my own personal history coming from healthcare and pharmaceutical development, where that's something that I wouldn't even say is standard in pharma, but it was something that we had used and that influenced the way that in some of the companies I've worked in, the way that we developed medicines for people with specific diseases, because we understood the disease, not just the diagnosis and the treatment, but the living with the disease. What does it mean to live with the disease? And therefore, how do you make their life easier by how you schedule their dosing and how you schedule the way that you consume the drug and how you design the clinical trials where you study it? How do we make it easier on patients? A lot of those kinds of insights in pharma are driven from ethnography. So I was coming with that tradition from public health and those kinds of things. So that's really, for me, was really important to do that. We also actually, interestingly, we started this in the US. We replicated that study in India.
Really?
We have the same insights. Yeah, we have the same, because obviously this is a company that, even though we start in Chicago, our intention is to go nationwide, and our intention also is to go beyond. We've replicated that abroad, and the insights, obviously you have different cultural lenses, but the insights, what olders want, are the same. And that they want to live independently, they don't want to bother their children. They really don't want to bother their children. But they do need a little help, but they don't want to ask for it. But they'll take it. But it's hard for them to take it. Yeah, exactly. So that was all very similar, strangely.
I think that's fascinating. And I imagine also that doing such rigorous research probably set you guys up for much more success going forward. Like, it probably made implementation and go to market a lot easier because you weren't having to sort of like test on the fly necessarily. I think, like you said, most startups do some product research ahead of time, and then I think some of the beauty of having a startup is the constant iteration. So then your product is always evolving. But at the same time, I'm very much in the camp of like, I want to make my life as easy as possible to then scale as quickly as possible. So you're not having to like redo things as you go. So I feel like putting, a lot of effort into the early research stages to do it thoroughly and to do it correctly the first time, I imagine really set you guys up for success later.
So I would say yes to all of that, in that I would say we are not immune to needing to do iterative choices and A/B testing constantly, and we do
Yeah.
that. I think because the research informed our understanding of the problem.
Mm.
It was less about the understanding of what it is that we were design. I mean, yes, it informed how we were going to design, but I think it's really important for the entrepreneurs that are listening and for your listeners is to think about when you're designing something, really get passionate about the problem that your
Yeah.
target customer is trying to solve. And that's why we invested so heavily in the research, is that we just wanted to say, before let's say we start designing this, and we could go down the road and we do the A/B testing, we do the iterative testing, and we realize we've designed a product in this direction, but the problem is over here. So we
Yeah.
wanted to really identify what is the problem, what are those challenges, again, hopes, dreams, fears, get really clear about that, really passionate about the problem we were trying to
Yeah.
solve. And then it reveals what the core needs are, and then we design our product and our offering. I think for us, like this idea of trust, like absolutely no, everything has to be 100% clear about trust, about avoiding fraud, about demonstrating mechanisms of why we're trustworthy, which influence the way that the website was designed, the way that the service providers come onto our site, the way that they come into our business, the way that we train them, the way that we monitor them, the way we communicate back to the customers themselves, the way we even pick up the phone as when we're talking to customers, explain to them what's happening. Everything is really driven by trust, and that purely comes from really understanding the problem that these elders have as they sit in their homes, and they're often quite vulnerable because this is it's the largest population of this age in our human history, and they have resources.
Yeah.
And there is so much fraud that's around these people. So we're very passionate about protecting them. Like an example of that is no cash transactions, no tipping ever.
Mhm.
If anyone tips, if anyone receives a tip from any of our customers, they're immediately kicked out.
Mm.
And that's because we just don't ever want to have any of the temptation of any money around at all, because we want to
Yeah.
protect our elders.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is that it's imperative to really understand your values as a company, because that, having set that foundation, really informs how you go about building, and how, not because I think it goes beyond like, employee values that you talk about when you go to hire someone. It's more deep than that. It's like if you are able to establish your values very clearly from the very beginning, it informs every aspect of the business, how you interact with customers, how you implement, how you scale, how you talk to other people about the business. Like it all comes back to that really important factor of what is your mission's values, or your company's values.
What is your mission's what is the company's values? What is that North Star? And
Yeah.
everything is informed by that. So maybe some of your listeners have used the EXO templates or exponential organization background work. If you don't know it, EXO, exponential organization, all the stuff is public source. You can go onto their website. They have these business model canvases. They have templates to help you identify and map out what is your massively transformative purpose, which can inform.
Hmm.
And so that's like the headline of the thing that never changes. It's not necessarily the how, but it's the headline of everything that you are driving towards. And then you can then create your values that you live with. You say like with your people and your organization, the culture that you drive comes from that. So we worked with
Yeah.
that material. It was really useful. And I think also like even at the early stages to cement on, like you say, purpose, your mission, and then what are the values? What's the brand personality that you have? How does that serve your persona that you have then served and designed for as your ideal customer? And what are the values that you're going to consistently show up as a brand? So we do that. We celebrate on the monthly basis. We call out, where would we see our values being lived, and we call them out
Yeah.
and celebrate them. And that's just a really key way, even in the early days, to celebrate and cement culture, because culture is everything,
Yeah.
especially when you're small. Every person, every consultant, every person that you bring into the organization influences culture. So as long as you're constantly coming back to your core mission, your vision, your values, your massively transformative purpose, and celebrating those values, it's really important to cement that culture.
So I work in tech right now. Technically, my title is office manager, but I do more than that. And I also am starting a tech platform with my co-founder as well. So I'm like running those two things concurrently. And culture is crazy. I mean, for my co-founder and I, we are still working through what the idea actually looks like. We're still ideating, but something we've already solidified are our company values. Like that was something that I really wanted us to focus on early and to have that solidified between the two of us because it's so the whole idea for us is really around like changing the ideas around how we work as a society, what that looks like. So it's a pretty big idea, and so something like that is really deeply rooted in his and I's values in life in general. And so we wanted to have that solidified, and seeing a company of 60 that I work for 9 to 5, culture is crazy, and like as an office manager, sometimes I facilitate on-site interviews and things like that. And there have been so many times where I have been able to been like, oh, I think this person's probably going to get hired. Or even when we have, people who have been working with us that I felt necessarily like weren't a cultural value or a cultural fit ended up leaving and things like that, where it's truly so prevalent in the startup sphere because it's such a small group of people. Whereas like when I was working in corporate, who knew really like they give you a packet when you start working about what your company values are, but you don't feel it when it's such a large group. With the exception, I did work for Disney, and that's probably the only place I've ever worked where I felt like the values were very clear and everyone was on this drinking the same Kool-Aid. I'd say that's probably more of the exception to the rule. But yeah, I think culture is very much felt, especially in the entrepreneurial space. And it's very key to have that stuff defined because that's the one thing that will not change and should not change as you grow.
100%. And I really like how you cemented this, Maddie, is that every person that you bring on in these early phases, they are part of kind of cementing. I mean, you and your founder have created the culture. You've got the values that drive it. They are going to enforce that culture.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we've seen are, culture is this, like, it's the oxygen that surrounds us. We breathe it in every day, but you don't always see it. And sometimes people say, yeah, well, it's the words that you put on the poster in the break room. But it's more than that because you embody it as leaders. So it's things like it's the language that you use. It's the stories that you tell. It's the symbols that you use. It's the way you interact. So for us, like, we have a great moment. We have a dance party. Like we have we're virtual pretty much, where we've got people all over the world, where if something happens, we get a new customer or we have amazing feedback, we'll have a 2-minute dance party. Like that's part of our culture, is that part of our culture is fun. One of our values is actually having fun. Family values, supporting families, having fun, being reverent, and like really like respecting and revering elders. And we're going to do that having fun with each other. So like, okay, so that's a part of our culture, which is, we do a dance party. And like a way that you can test this in other organizations when you're interviewing, and you know this probably from your 9 to 5, is people who are interviewing to go into your organization could say, what happens here that happens nowhere else?
Oh, it's a great question.
That's a signal of culture, because that they're going to say, this is how we act, or this is kind of the way of the words we use, or this is the way we do meetings, or they're different, they're zany, whatever. So that's a way of like helping monitor that it's working for you as well, like watching your people and asking them those questions. Yeah.
Totally. And so for the listeners, I've been keeping this in my back pocket because I've been waiting for the right moment to ask you about it. And I feel like with culture, this is the perfect segue to talk about your improv life. One of the reasons I think we wanted to chat was because it's such a cool life skill. And I'm 100% positive that it has positively impacted you as a founder in terms of confidence and speaking abilities. So I would love to dive into that, how you got started with improv, what that experience was like, how it's helped you, all of the things.
So improv for me sunk its teeth deeply into my skin about 13 years ago. And I was in a like a community theater, just hobby, like just pure, let's have fun doing community theater, etc. And I took an improv class and I just thought, oh, what is this? I want more right now. And if anyone's ever had that moment of like pure love from improv from the beginning, you'll relate to this. And that it's, first of all, it's just fun. Like, isn't it
Yeah.
great to laugh for an hour? It's just great. But what I realized was, while I did it, I don't think I'd ever felt more present with other people, just
Interesting.
fully present. And then afterwards, the kind of flow state or buzz or connection that I felt with the people that I did improv with, it really sustained itself for a long time. So I was like, this is interesting, cool. And then I moved actually to a new company in a new country. And I really was like, I want to do this. And I
Yeah.
realized I had to build it.
Cool.
So I created a lunch and laugh program in the company I was working in, and a bunch of us just weirdos got together and we learned how to do some improv and we started playing. And again, those people who did this with us over lunch, we realized that we'd unleashed something in ourselves
Oh,
that helped us think differently. We were super cohesive. We were thinking differently. We had more neuron connections,
yeah.
and we created a new business model that the company we were working in still uses today.
Wow.
That was a good 12 years ago. So that's pretty interesting. So I realized the love of it, and then the application to work. I'm also really fortunate that along this storyline, my timeline, I trained at Second City. And I went through the improv program and went through the conservatory program, had to audition in front of, all of the groups, the Toronto, the Chicago group, the Hollywood group, and I got in. And so
Wow.
I went through the full conservatory program where you do both improv and you do improv to sketch, and then you perform sketches. And then again, the Second City model is you create a review where they're sketch based, and then at the end of the show, you have an improv segment where you're still building the next show. So it's
Cool.
really like, speaking like the link to entrepreneurship and also tech is improv is constantly iterating. And of course, the rules of improv, you're yes-anding, you're listening,
Mhm.
you're serving everyone else, and you're failing with joy. So that's the iteration part, is like you're just trying to burn through as fast as possible. What doesn't work? What does? Let's keep testing A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, and it goes. So now, where I live, I run a little improv school and I teach it and I perform it, both for actors who want to perform and are part of our ensemble that we have as like our professional performance ensemble. And we also do a lot of this work inside companies. So I'll do consulting
Mm.
with different corporations that want to either use improv as a skill, as a way to just create some levity and some fun. They also often are in the middle of a change, like an organizational transformation, and they really are struggling with how they're
Mm.
going to connect with groups that maybe have dramatically changed in status. Like if you had a
Okay.
massive reorganization, some people have been pushed out, some people have been promoted really fast. You've got this kind of strange group of people that are now assembled to work together, and they don't really know how to do that. So using improv as a tool can actually shortcut that time to form a team really quickly. So we just did that last week, which is super, super fun. And then in my own company, we use the tools of improv inside our company, of course, with my staff, with my service providers. I teach them some improv tools that then they use when they're working with our olders. And I've even taught improv to olders in nursing homes. And that is my absolute favorite. That is
So fun.
that is my absolute favorite, because doing that with caregivers, with olders themselves, it's literally Benjamin buttoning them completely.
Yeah.
Like I saw people transform their posture from this to this. I swear people grew like this much, right?
Yeah.
Like they stood up straight. Their voices were stronger. Their eyes were determined. They were focused. They connected with each other. And I remember the nursing home director or directors, while we've done this, have said, I never was able to get these people to interact.
Yeah.
They kind of would sit there blankly staring off in the distance, and now they're laughing with each other and talking with each other. They have inside jokes with each other. So this is
Amazing.
just it's like it'll change your world. It'll change
Yeah.
your whole world.
I think it's really interesting. Like, I remember being in high school and middle school, being a theater kid, and doing improv challenges were always, I think, the hardest because there's, I think, like a wall you have to get past where, especially like as a high schooler, middle schooler, everything is awkward and uncomfortable. And like, you just don't want attention because you feel like you're going to die. And I feel like that is the hardest part to get over for improv, but it's also, I think, the key to like unlocking that next level version of yourself. I just want to know, like, maybe what are some of your tactics that you take people through to get them over the initial awkward?
Yeah. So first of all, with kids, I will say I do teach kids as well. I have a teen class, and I think that's often one of the more challenging ones. And I think that is tied to our evolution
Mm,
because, part of the period of being an adolescent is really about hardwiring you to be connected to your pack or your tribe, to be
mm,
super hyper connected. So to be different is, evolutionarily
mm.
speaking, potentially putting you at risk for not being able to be inside your group. And if you are pushed out of your group, then you might not survive.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like a psychological, neurological, evolutionary risk that we're perceiving. So for teenagers, this idea of using improv as a tool to say, we're going to learn how to fail with joy, and that some of the goals of improv is doing it right or perfectly actually isn't that interesting. We're
Yeah.
looking for the mistakes because the
Cool.
mistakes catch you off guard and make you create something new. So I think with teenagers, and I think just with humans in general, it's
Yeah.
like literally teaching the rules. And the rules are just such a great guidebook for how to live as a person,
Totally.
how to be a member of your community, how to be a leader, how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a mother. It's like a great roadmap. So yes, and so we walk into a meeting and we say, this is a great idea. I like it. Yes, but crash,
Yeah.
right? So trying to eliminate this yes, but thinking, because yes, but thinking and yes, but mindset kills the creative flow and
Yeah.
kills the sense of collaboration. Rather, in improv, we say yes, and. So that is to say, for example, Maddie, if you're offering me if you say, oh, here we are in a bakery, yes, and we're selling, chocolate flavored gumdrops today, yes, then we start creating something together. So it's saying yes and keeping building. And then it's listen. Because you're creating something from nothing, you have to be super hyper connected with your people, and you can't think ahead. You have to be listening in the moment. So a lot of those tactics, shortcut the collaboration because people listen better, because very often we're not very good at listening as humans. We're often taking turns talking.
Yeah.
But some of these tools that we use with improv and recall, like really having to remember and recall, you have to listen differently and you have to listen more effectively. And then it's
Yeah.
served. None of this diva behavior. Like, it's about, if we're doing a scene together, it's me making you look like a total star and vice versa. So that's
Mm.
service, like in leadership. And then the last one is fail with joy. And that's being comfortable messing up, knowing that if things mess up and they go off the rails, that's probably where the funny moment is going to happen, and just play with it. And know that if it does go off the rails, just let it go and
Yeah.
sell it and have a good time.
Yeah.
And then you can start over.
No, I think there's so much incredible nuance to unpack here because first one for me that I think is huge is listening. I think in life we get so panicked when we're confronted by usually sometimes like I'm going to just put this in like an entrepreneur perspective where let's say like you're pitching to an investor and they're asking you tough questions or they're really drilling down into your idea and they're, you know, confronting you with what you've presented to them. I think the initial reaction sometimes is like panic and you don't know how to because you're like being confronted, right? You just don't know how to necessarily respond. And to stand back and to just be present and listen as opposed to like letting the panic take over. So then that way you can respond because like at the end of the day as entrepreneurs, nobody knows your business better than you do. And, obviously going into those interactions is a whole other situation that we could talk about. But I think listening is so key as a leader, as a business person, as a friend, as a family member. Learning to listen in the present is such an important skill in life. And I think with that gives you a sense of confidence in yourself because you're not like panicking, you're just present.
Yeah. So the presence that you get from listening and also the confidence that you get from having more examples of just literally bombing and failing, you
Yeah.
realize I'm not going to die. I'm
Yeah.
not going to die. I'm going to be okay. Often, also, what I teach people is even to build a character. So, if you're walking into a VC or
Mm.
private equity meeting, you can build a character in advance and then you kind of play that character. Yes, you're you, but maybe you're you who really is that, maybe your posture is different, maybe your voice is different, maybe the person that you're thinking of walking in that meeting is maybe a more confident version of you. You
Yeah.
play that character and know that I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
worst that's going to happen is I'm going to keep listening, like you say, and I'm just going to ask again. Like I'm going to take a step back, take a beat, take a breath, and just play it over and talk it over.
I always say failure is just data. And especially in those kinds of interactions where someone is asking you like deep, interesting questions about your business, I think as an entrepreneur, you should almost be like grateful because those are questions that you obviously or sometimes didn't think of, which could better your business. I think that we just get scared as people for someone that like maybe, they don't like our idea or they don't think it's good enough. And then we panic and we get scared and we're like, oh, we're failures. Whereas it's more like, this is great. I'm getting more information. I'm thinking about things in a way that I haven't before that could improve the business that I can improve in myself. And I welcome those kinds of opportunities because it's not every day that you get them. And the other thing that I really liked that you talked about was not having like the diva energy, about making sure that your co-star in the moment is as shining as much as you are because you guys are putting in the same energy levels. You're giving as much as you're getting and you want to continue the scene, you want to continue the momentum, you don't want to be the reason that stops. And so I think taking that energy, taking that thought process into life is coming to at life from such a genuine perspective. It's humble, it's caring, it's giving, and there's so much to be had in those kinds of experiences. There's so much that you can gain by giving.
100% service. It's
Yeah.
servant leadership. And this thing that you said earlier about the interactions you have with potential fundraisers, funders. I mean, I feel this myself that, my co-founder and I, or my founder and I we're working so deeply in the business because it's a startup and you're doing everything, right? And so often it is easy to get those blinders up because you know that you have a target, you're driving towards that target and everyone is doing that. Everyone's luckily pulling in the same direction, but you are doing that. And you might have hyper focus, which you need, but by becoming hyper focused, you might not look at other opportunities, which a funder will.
Yeah.
So, these private equity VCs, they're looking at funding applications every single day. They know your industry, they know other industries that are adjacent to you, and they might be able to actually give you great ideas. And I love these conversations because it gets me a moment to like rip me out of pure operations and rip me
Yeah.
out of day to day and to say, wow, you're looking at this for the first time. You've offered me something that is a nuanced perspective that I hadn't thought of because you come from, I don't know, the retail industry. You come from a different industry from me. And I really appreciate that. So I think that is part of this also no non-diva behavior is to be able
Yeah.
to take feedback from places where you don't expect it. I think I'm trying to remember his name. I'm sorry, I can't remember it. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx. Her husband is
Yeah. Yeah.
also a really established entrepreneur. Jesse. Anyway, he's awesome. I follow him in a lot of different places. And he had said, in the end, like the thing that's going to be the big moments for your business are often not in your business plan. It's going to be that chance meeting on the street. It's going to be that chance meeting maybe with a fundraiser or with one of your customers who really wants you to do something different. And that's going to take you into the direction that actually gives you that hockey stick.
Yeah.
And it's not what you're ready for. So again, like being a servant leader, listening, being ready, and that kind of true improv, like yes and mindset, if you're open for it, you're able to actually receive it, and then you can take it in, and then you use it to drive your business forward.
Yeah, I think as CEOs, coming at the experience, like knowing that you're not necessarily the smartest person in the room, I think is so key, because it's exactly like you said, it opens you up to other opportunities, other perspectives, other feedback. And to be, especially in the early stages when it's like you, maybe two other people working to get this thing off the ground, you are so deep in the weeds that you need to be able to step back, zoom out a little bit, get a different perspective, get feedback, take it, and then run with it. Because I think you probably will not scale beyond the level of feedback that you're willing to receive, because otherwise, like, how are you supposed to learn?
Okay, listeners, did you all just hear that? Like, if you pause, go back 10 seconds and just listen to what Maddie just said, because that is huge, what you just said. That needs to be in the show notes. Make sure you write that in the show notes. That's fantastic. That's it. That's gold. Wow.
So what else have you learned about improv? Like what has been like your most favorite thing that you've grown, or like maybe something that you feel like changed you by doing improv?
Yeah. I think that the mantra that I have, that I have accepted through improv, is that improv always gives, it never takes. And I say that because in my own personal entrepreneurial journey, or on my own personal life journey over the last couple of years, I, like everyone else, have gone through major ups and downs in the last bit of time through COVID, etc. And I am just so grateful that I had improv as a tool, because there are days when maybe you want to lie on the floor and cry and you don't
Yeah.
want to get up, or you just want to stay on the sofa, or you're exhausted, or you're just out of ideas. And I think in moments of crisis, be they personal crisis, be they geopolitical, be they health crisis associated with the last 4 years that we've had in our human history, often the instinct is to retreat into your own self, into your own isolation, and possibly your own loneliness. Now, improv is a tool that I have in me, that I've trained, and also that a practice that I have with people that I perform with. You can't do it alone. You always do it with someone else. And so it's a ready-made community, and it's a ready-made ability to instantly connect with others. And so for me, like, obviously with my ensemble, we have a really great connection. With the courses that I teach, we always have great connection. But I find that I'm just more bold in general using these tools in my life. Like, I get in an elevator, it's like we're on stage, right? Like, here we go. Like, we're going to improv something. Or I just feel more bold talking to people just spontaneously. And that is an incentive to connect. And I think to do improv is to transform from one state to another. Like, on stage, it could be from low status to high status, or low energy to high energy, or whatever, or like from loneliness to community. So I think that improv is always there. It always gives, it doesn't take. And because of that ability that we have to transform ourselves and connect. So I think if anything, that is probably the biggest aha for me, and that it transformed in every way I interact with people, and as a leader, and as a founder, and as a mother, and all these things. It really helps a lot.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I found really interesting that you talk about is how improv really forces you to always be thinking and to come up with new ideas. And it's like the second you feel blocked, like you have someone to rely on to help you push through those like creative moments of block, but there's always something on the other side. Like it never stops. And I think that's such an important life lesson to learn, that when you feel like you're running up against a wall, that you will be able to find ways to get to the next step and to overcome that hurdle.
To overcome the hurdle and to overcome the mistake or the failure or the crisis. And I'm even just thinking about there was an incident where I was hosting a really big event with the chairman of one of the big publicly traded top 3 pharma companies.
Wow.
Globally. I was working on the stage with the chairman. We had thousands of people attending, both present and online. And we had a major tech failure, major tech fail with someone who was zooming in from Malaysia. And it was like one of those high stakes moments that's super cringe, right? You never want that to happen when you're hosting an event like this.
No.
And I remember just leaning into the improv and like, let's fail with joy, right?
Yeah.
And in that moment, no cringe. Do not be cringe. Like, no. I think that's the other thing is like never let the audience feel uncomfortable. And again, when you think about the extension of this, your audience could be the team that you're serving as a leader, or the community that you're in, or literally the audience that you're presenting in front of. If it's a work context or if it's a performance context, don't let them feel uncomfortable. So you take the funny, you take the failure, you work it through. And I remember we were playing with the technology, and I just started using improv tools where when like the person's frozen on the screen or there's no audio and they're acting it out, and I just started voicing over what it was, and he did something like this, and I was like, yeah, I mean, and he was talking about a breast cancer screening program in Kuala Lumpur, and I can't hear you, and he's like, and I said, well, but Beyonce agrees, and all the single ladies in the room, raise your hand, get your hands up, because breast cancer screening is very important, and everyone just ripped with laughter.
Oh my God.
And then things went back online, but it was that moment where like everything fell apart, and it could have just been like, oh, what do we do? I don't know. But we just leaned into it, and that was pure improv. And I remember someone from the audience came to me and said, how did you do that?
Yeah.
How did you do that? Because you took a moment where everyone should have become really uncomfortable, but you put us at ease. And I think that's the role of the leader. Mm. That's the role of the improviser. And marrying those two qualities is, how do you, ultimately it's like emotional regulation and stability. Yeah. And that, it's not about a leader being that strong person who's whipping people, but being the person who can take the hit for the rest of the people, and helping your people feel comfortable, confident, so that they can perform. And so they don't have to worry about that stuff. The leader takes it on and they can get back to work. So it's that kind of quality that you use as an improviser and as a leader at the same time.
Yeah, you're everyone's rock. You're the person that they turn to when things get uncomfortable or hard, and they look to you for guidance, and you need to be able to handle the emotions of the moment and remain their stability. Like, you just are everyone else's stability. Like, that is your role as the leader and the founder, CEO, whatever you want to call it. That is what you're supposed to do.
And again, how we apply that, like going back to my company as the CEO of this company, Viva Valet, using this at the very micro level, like our call center, like how do we teach these people some of these tools? How do we teach our service providers how to do this? How do we help our customers feel comfortable because they're in a high risk, high stakes, potentially worried about trust? How do we help them feel more trustworthy? If you can put someone at ease, and often laughter is the thing that disarms concern and fear.
Yeah.
So then if you can laugh with someone, if you can laugh and play with someone, then you can work together. And if you can laugh and play, then you can actually instill trust as well. So that's part of what we're constantly trying to do in keeping our customers comfortable.
I think that was great. I think this sounds honestly like the most perfect place to close. I feel like that's a great mic drop. Thank you so much. This has been incredible.